A certain website has been brought to my attention, and it bears the moniker of Liberal Logic 101. So right off the bat, you know it's going to be hyperbole, like saying, oh my god, look how stupid these people are, and just making a spectacle of them. And if you're trying to educate people, you're never going to want to use that approach, because you're making them feel stupid. So obviously this isn't meant to be something that you actually look at and evaluate, it's meant to be a circle jerk for people on the far right. That being said, I'm going to look at it anyways, because why not? It looks like fun. And by the way, when I say the right and it's against the liberals, I'm not talking about like liberal versus conservative or liberal versus libertarian or Democrat versus Republican. It's just like the far right extremists like rightwingwatch.org, like that group. Like people who are just so far removed from reality that all you can really do is just sort of ask how they do it, how they are like that. And it's not something that people like to do because it feels like a waste of time, but I figured I'd do it anyway. So yeah, wish me luck. Here we go. College football player's imaginary girlfriend dies? Headline news for days. 650,000 people march on Washington, D.C. in opposition to abortion? Cricket noise. Tell me, what good is the First Amendment if the media censor themselves? Alright, so why would you do a story about some stupid celebrity thing, but not about some massive movement that has hundreds of thousands of followers? The reason why is because the news doesn't have the job of actually reporting the news, if you didn't know that, believe it or not. It actually has the job of reporting stories that people want to hear, because that way they make more ad revenue. That's the way that news stations work. And a lot of people view that as a problem. It's something that we can be concerned about. But it's not suppression of freedom of speech. Freedom of speech means that you can say whatever you want. Not that you will say whatever you want. Like, I can want to go out in the park and stand up on a soapbox and just scream all of my beliefs from the top of the world. But I don't do that. Is that a suppression of freedom of speech? No, it's my choice. Freedom of speech means that the media outlets can say whatever they want to, but it doesn't mean that they have to report on everything. And obviously, people who are just watching mainstream news don't care about the breaking news. They just want to be entertained. People who actually care about news go out and learn about these things on their own from more independent or smaller and more focused news sources. That's what I do, and that's how I knew about this March for Life. And I also believe it happens pretty much every year. It's like a periodic thing. So by that news, it's not really like breaking news, like, OMG, look at this. It was planned, it's very regular. People who know anything or care about this area of the news knew it was going to happen. So in that way, it's not breaking news. That's like saying that the gay pride parade is news. I mean, it's certainly interesting, and we know that it happens, but it's periodical, so it's not breaking news. Abortion. Because your right to make your own medical choices is absolute and cannot be denied. Obamacare. Because the government needs to make medical choices for you, even if you don't want them to. Alright, abortion versus Obamacare. Now, first off, I'm not exactly 100% in support of Obamacare. I think that there's some things that are good, some things that are bad, because that's the realistic way to look at life. Nothing is just good or bad. It's a mix, and it's about give and take. But abortion is supposed to be about person choosing what they want for themselves and what they think is best, and Obamacare is about the government making that decision for you. But how is Obamacare the decision being made for you by the government? First off, universal health care isn't like that because it's not about the government controlling medicine, it's about controlling health insurance. So you can argue that the socialized health insurance is making those decisions for you, but in our society, health insurance companies are already making that decision for you, so you don't have much of a difference. And you could argue, yeah, well, you can just get another health insurance company if you don't like yours, but you really can't because most people don't buy their own health insurance, they get it from their employer. In fact, I think that's a bad thing because it makes people afraid to leave their employer and go on independent ventures, like try and make their own company. They're afraid to leave. They're at the whim of these health insurance companies. So in that way, it could possibly make more freedom. But this isn't even about universal health care. That's not what Obamacare is. It's just saying that you have to get health insurance. Now, do I agree with that? Somewhat yes, somewhat no, in different ways, but it's not anybody making decisions for you, because you still have all the different health insurance companies. The only decision that's being made for you is that you have to do something. You can't do nothing. You can debate about whether that's a good thing or not, but it's not making any other decisions. Like, they're not deciding that old people are gonna be put in front of a death panel, or that your child isn't gonna be able to get the vaccination it needs in order to get better, or anything like that. It's not saying what medical care you can or can't get, just that you have to sign up for some form of insurance. So it's not the same thing. It's a sure sign that people don't trust you when you have to take your oath of office on 3 Bibles instead of just 1. Alright, I actually have a funny story about this one. I read Obama getting sworn in on 3 Bibles, and I'm like, that's not true. How can it be true? So I actually Google it, Obama sworn in on, and guess what the first answer was? Guess, a Quran. I don't know why so many people want Obama to be a Muslim so badly. But even if he was, do you really think he would just be so stupid that he would swear in on a Quran? Do you really think that he would just be so idiotic? Like, I know that there are some people that are just that stupid that they don't think. Like, I recently heard this story about a teacher who was, like, smoking pot and getting naked and teasing her students, and she was putting it all on Twitter, and then the news company called her, and she was, like, denying it, like, no, that's not my Twitter account. But then 2 minutes later, she sends out a tweet like, OMG, the local news just contacted me. There are instances of people being really stupid, but the way the world works, it just weeds them out. You don't get to be president entering your 2nd term and then make a massive slip-up like that. The country would not elect him if he was Muslim, so why would he do that? It doesn't make any sense. But what about the question, was he sworn in on 3 Bibles? Technically, yes, but why? Well, he was sworn in twice. One was a private official ceremony, and the other was like the big, like, it looked fancy. Like, that's the one that you saw on TV. But normally people will do things in 2 ceremonies. One is like an official, law-abiding one, and the other is like just a setup. It looks cool. You do it for the press. A lot of people do this with weddings. They'll actually get officially married, like in the law, and then they'll have their service. And that's what he did, so that explains 2 of them. What about the 3rd? Well, in the official one, apparently he was sworn in on 2 Bibles. One of them was Abraham Lincoln's Bible, and the other was Martin Luther King Jr.'s Bible. Now, you might ask, why is he doing that? This really asks the question, though, why people think that Obama would just swear on a stack of 3 Bibles, though. Is it like the Bible is a unit of truth measurement? Like, we don't trust this guy, so we gotta swear in on a Bible. But we don't trust him that much, so we gotta make him swear in on 2, that'll do the job. But we still don't, so let's make him swear in on 10. Can you imagine someone swearing on a stack of 10 Bibles? Like, what is the benefit of that? What sense does that make? The reason why he swore in on 2 Bibles were, like I said, because they're about Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King Jr., and Obama's the first black president. That's a big deal for a lot of people. Plus, he's a Democrat, which a lot of people view as the party of poor people, and a lot of African Americans tend to fall in that demographic, so they view that as symbolic. It was a symbol thing. Like, a lot of presidents swear on Bibles that have some historical relevance, and he just chose 2 instead of 1 in that instance. It's not like he was doing it to make himself look really, really good. That doesn't make any sense. But then again, I guess things don't have to make sense when you're part of an extremist right-wing circle jerk. Okay, so today let's hold a parade to honor a man who lived, fought, and died to end segregation in the only remaining segregated neighborhoods in America, and all the people who've chosen to voluntarily segregate themselves can participate and then pretend they are honoring the man. Alright, Martin Luther King Jr. Day. First off, what did Martin Luther King Jr. stand for? He stood for ending segregation, saying that the government can't step in and tell you that you can't do this or that because you're black or you're white. Or the government can't say the whole separate but equal stuff, where you're actually being put in a crappy school that you're not going to have the same advantages as because you're black instead of white. Now, did he want to live in a world where people truly are colorblind? Like, I'm friends with people and they may be black, they may be white, it doesn't care. Not necessarily. He may have ideally wanted that, but that's not what he was fighting for. He just wanted people to have the same rights and opportunities, so that if they wanted to do that, they could. And honestly, they can. Now, as someone who went to a high school that had a large African American population, I can tell you that in many instances, people just tend to stick with their own race. The black people stay with the black people, and the white people stay with the white people. But that's not all the time. People can move out and stay with people of other races if they want to. They can hang out with them, and that's not viewed as weird. We can go to the same schools. We can have the same opportunities. We can work together. We can do much of the same stuff. That is allowed. That's not banned by government, and that's not opposed by the people. That's the point. That's what he stands for. But when you talk about neighborhoods being segregated, it's not like people just decided that they're going to live in separate areas. There's this thing called redlining. Basically what happened was people's values in life is not determined by how much money they have. It's determined by assets, the stuff that you have. Like if you sold that off, how much money would you have? And the biggest asset that people own is their home. The real estate value. That's why you get concerned if your next door neighbor paints their house neon green, because it looks ugly and it lowers your real estate value. Now, this was going on largely in the 50s, where there was a lot of basically strongly suggested racism towards minorities. So what happened was, if you were a white guy and a black guy was trying to move in your neighborhood, people viewed that as degrading your real estate value. If a bunch of black people are moving in, that's going to make you seem more dangerous or not in a safe area. So that makes people panic. They don't want it anymore. The demand for those houses goes down. And when demand goes down and supply stays stagnant, the prices are going to go down. And thus the black people who were more poor are more capable of purchasing those houses. It happened because basically the system was racist, and it set up the world so that black people were in areas that were less expensive. And since they were in those positions, they could afford it. I mean, I have a friend in high school who basically had a mansion-sized house. It was big and it was beautiful, but it was worth less than my house, which is a lot smaller. Why? Because he was in the heart of Detroit, and Detroit is viewed as a scary place. Even though it's a beautiful house, it's not in the right area, so it's not worth much, and that means that they have less value in assets. That's what happened. It's not black people deciding that they're just going to avoid white people altogether. It's the circumstances. And that's what happened. And that's bad. We're trying to work on that. We're trying to get away from that. But it's not people just deciding that they're going to fuck Martin Luther King Jr. and pretend to honor him anyway. That doesn't make any sense.
To emphasize the importance of his policies in protecting the nation from the evils of gun ownership, President Obama surrounds himself with children for his latest press conference. At least I think that's President Obama. Sometimes those socialist dictators look alike to me.
I'll never understand why people always say that Obama or anybody else is necessarily a socialist, and then compare that to other bad people like Hitler and say that he was a socialist. Fun fact, socialism is often affiliated with communism, and the communists and the Nazis were kind of enemies in World War II. It was kind of because of the communists, the socialists, that Nazi Germany lost, in addition to the Americans and the Allies working together and stuff. That is what happened. It's not like Hitler was a socialist. Why say socialist dictator? I'll never understand that. But basically you're criticizing Obama because he's being seen with kids. And if you're going to talk about the shooting and how that's manipulating people's emotions, fine, I understand that. But every leader likes to get photographed with children because it makes them look good. That's just a thing that leaders do. That's not an Obama thing and a Hitler thing, and it's just them two, and look, they're similar. That's something that everybody does. Everybody does it. So that's not an evil dictator thing.
Barack Hussein Obama supports civilian uprising in Egypt, Libya, and Syria. Still wonders why American civilians would ever need assault rifles.
Yes, Obama supports the rebels in Egypt, Libya, and Syria, but not in the U.S., because the U.S. is in a situation that is exactly equal to Egypt, Libya, and Syria. This is a well-known fact. Now, I'm not really opposed to gun control. I don't really like most gun laws that get proposed, but if you are talking about the need for these assault rifles, and you're talking about what they need it for when they're actively being oppressed by their government or by rebel groups, and then you compare it to our situation where you're basically sitting on a TV watching TV and eating Cheetos, and maybe there's a chance that someone will break in your house and you want to use a gun to fight them off. The situation is different.
I mean, I don't believe we should ban certain things that people believe we should ban, but that doesn't change the fact that we are in a totally different situation from those countries. So I don't think that's hypocrisy, and anybody who does is just selectively looking at things in order to advantage themselves and their viewpoint.
Gun shows. Number of mass shootings in the past 20 years? 0. Percent armed? 95. Schools. Number of mass shootings in the past 20 years? 387. Percent armed? 0%. The chances of a location being the site of a mass shooting is inversely proportional to the percentage of people in that location being armed. Conclusion? To make more locations safe, there should be fewer guns.
So, we have a comparison between no gun zones like schools and yes gun zones, which are gun shows. Now, obviously, there are going to be less mass shootings in gun shows than in schools because everybody has a gun at a gun show. And if you don't, there's 50 on the table next to you, so you're set. Now, is it true that you're going to be less likely to shoot a place up if everybody has a gun and they can shoot back? Yes, but it's also true that if you have a gun, you're more likely to accidentally hurt yourself, or you're likely to go crazy and start shooting people. The two main injury causes with guns are suicide and accidental injury. It doesn't really fight off and defend you so much. My concern with gun control is that prohibition tends to not work, and I understand that. If you're talking about that, I can listen, but it's not true that if you just give everybody a gun, it's going to make the world safer. Especially if you're talking about giving it to teachers. People are talking about arming the teachers. What if they aren't properly armed? What if they accidentally hurt someone? Or are you suggesting that we really make the majority of people in schools, i.e. the children, have guns, like you would in a gun show? Because the majority of them aren't going to be trained, and a lot of them probably won't want guns. You talk about allowing guns in school. I mean, I can understand maybe to some degree if you allow 1 or 2 armed guards in front of the school, which I think a lot of school districts allow anyway if the majority of people want it, but that's not the same as having the gun show where everybody has a gun. And putting a place filled with children and allowing everybody to have a gun, I don't think that's necessarily the smartest idea. Just saying.
Burning the U.S. flag is acceptable because it's just a swatch of cloth and doesn't mean anything. Displaying the Confederate flag is unacceptable because it's a symbol of hatred.
Alright, so the Confederate flag is apparently a symbol of hatred, and it's horrible, and you should never fly it because it's just evil. But the American flag, if you burn that, it's okay because it's just a piece of cloth. So what is a flag? Is it a piece of cloth or is it a symbol? Well, it's both, because you can't just have a symbol but not have it be anything, like just some arbitrary symbol floating around. You have to have a thing, and it has a meaning that people understand, that you attach it to. That's what a symbol is. Flags are symbols. They represent something, whether it's your country, whether it's something greater than a country or smaller than a country, like a state or a province or something, or it's some non-governmental organization, or it's just an idea like, say, anarchy, I don't know, or Marxism, or anything. It represents an idea, and when you fly the flag, you're saying that you support that idea, and when you burn or destroy the flag, you're saying that you don't support the idea. When people are talking about the American flag or the Confederate flag, we're talking about the ideas that they represent, and whether you support them or not. Now, if you talk about burning the U.S. flag, that can either mean you don't like what the U.S. supports, like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or whatever, or you don't support their actions. Maybe you don't support their actions, and that's fine. If you don't like it, you can protest it. That's freedom of speech. Also, if you want to fly a Confederate flag, you have the freedom to do that. Like, the way that they're talking about this is on Liberal Logic 101, by the way, which liberal versus conservative, you think they're talking about policy, but I don't know anybody who's talking about banning Confederate flags. People might give you a funny look, and I see that all the time when I'm with friends and I look into a house that has a Confederate flag on it. People think weirdly of that. Why? Because it's affiliated with racism. Why is the Confederate flag affiliated with racism? Confederacy was made to protest and leave the United States of America in the South because they felt like the federal government was overstepping its boundaries. Why? Because they were telling the South that you can't have slaves. That's wrong. Now, a lot of people protest this and say that the Civil War was not about slavery and racism, it was about states' rights. And I love states' rights, I'm a supporter of states' rights. I honestly think that if we gave more stuff to the states, things would run smoother. But there are things that are best for the federal government, like saying that you can't own slaves. Besides, even if it wasn't about racism at all, which in many ways it actually wasn't. In fact, I don't believe Lincoln was even opposed to slavery. He actually owned slaves. He only did it as a way to fight against the rebels in the South. It wasn't necessarily a unified idea like the North were the good guys and the South were the bad guys. It was just circumstance. But let's say that there is a way to objectively say that the Civil War was not about slavery and racism. It was just about states' rights versus centralized government. Let's say that was it. Okay, so what? People understand it to have a different meaning. It doesn't matter what something objectively means, whatever objectively means, but it's about what people understand it to mean. For example, look at the word condescending. If someone says that you're condescending, you understand that to mean like you're intimidating them. But it actually means the opposite. It actually means that you're humbling yourself and making yourself look smaller in comparison to them. So why does it have this other meaning? Because people started using it sarcastically. People are saying, oh, I condescend to you, when you're really intimidating them and trying to scare them, push them into doing what you want. Now, if someone says that you're condescending, you can try and pull out a dictionary and technically prove them wrong, but it doesn't matter. People understand socially what your statement means. So trying to go around that isn't doing anything. It's not protecting you. It's not making them look stupid because they know what you really meant. If you're flying a Confederate flag, you may say it's about states' rights, but they know that it has a connotation with slavery and racism. You can try and avoid that, but it's just the truth. Even if it's wrong, it's just the world that we live in. People have that association, and if you don't like it, tough luck, because that's what we have. People cling on to titles, and there's nothing you can do about it at all.
Same-sex marriage is about freedom. The freedom to force everyone to endorse homosexuality, whether they like it or not. Don't be fooled by the rhetoric. The only way same-sex marriage can become legal is at gunpoint, by forcing every person, business, organization, and church to accept and endorse it.
Alright, this is going to be the last one because I feel like I've picked on the site enough, but I feel like this is a good place to end. Is gay marriage increasing or reducing the freedom of others? Well, obviously, you would say that if individuals are told that they can't do something that's repressing freedom, and if you tell them that they can, then you're increasing freedom, and that's the idea of gay marriage. If people want to marry someone of the same spouse, then they're more free. Only problem is you're forcing companies to recognize this gay marriage, and you're forcing religious institutions to recognize these marriages. Well, that depends on what you mean by recognize. If there's like a company, and they often give benefits to individuals based on who they're married or if they're married at all, then yes, it is going to force them to recognize it. Now, is that at gunpoint? Is that forcing them? Is that reducing their freedom? Well, technically, yeah, but you got to keep in mind what we're talking about here. It's talking about individuals choosing to marry someone and then you either recognizing it or not recognizing it. And there are several instances that you can bring up this, like interracial marriage. I forget which one, but one of the states in the Deep South, I think it's Alabama, like a third of all adult white male Republicans believe that interracial marriages should be banned by law. A lot of people think this. It's not a majority anymore, but a lot of people still think that interracial marriage should not be allowed. So what do we do about that? What if you're a business runner and you don't want to allow interracial marriage couples to get the benefits of marriage? Evaluating that, most people would say, screw it, you have to do it. So if you have that position, I find it kind of hard to take the other stance about gay marriage just because you have a different opinion on it. If the government recognizes it as a marriage in the same way they represent a male and a female getting married as marriage, and they can force you to recognize that, it's the same thing, really. If you want to say that the government forcing you to recognize gay marriage is oppression, in that context, I understand, but I think it's stupid. That's like saying that the government is oppressing you by forcing you to not kill people, or rape people, or burn down their houses. The government does have powers, and a lot of people talk about limiting it, but I think there are basic things we can agree are best for government to do, like saying you can't rape, steal, or murder. And recognition of marriage, like protecting people on the basis of different races or different sexual orientations, I think that's a good thing. Maybe you disagree. Maybe we should allow companies to oppress black people or tell women that they can't get hired because they like men more. If you believe that and you believe that fighting against that is oppression, I can get that, but it still makes you look like a scumbag, so there's nothing I can really say. And that's all I have for Liberal Logic 101. A lot of stupid posts, and they pretty much make a new one every single day, so if you want to read more about it, you can look down below. Maybe you'll want to make a video about it too, and you can post a video response. It'll be lots of fun, but that's all I have to say about it for now, other than it's stupid, and that the people who made it should die in a hole. Yay! So yeah, die in a hole, Liberal Logic 101 users.